Yo, Wemby saved the NBA. Wemby saved the National Basketball Association. He became Doctor Strange in the Avengers Infinity War movie. He saw the timeline. He saw all these alternative, timelines of futures. Like, what's going to happen if SGA, two-time MVP, two-time defending champions, wins the Finals MVP for 2 straight years? What's going to happen to the league I love so much if he accomplishes that? And he didn't like it. And he did something. He made history in a way that we've never seen before. His first time in the playoffs. This is his first time ever in the playoffs. He forget going to the finals for the first time ever in his first season run. Something that we have never seen in the history of the league. Not in this fashion. Because yes, Bill Russell won a championship in his first season. But remember, Bob Cousy was the MVP that year. So offensively, you had him, you had Bill Sharman, you had other players take on the offensive end. Now Bill Russell completely changed that team defensively and completely changed the game on that end of the floor, but still relied on his teammates to be able to take everyone on the offensive end. Magic Johnson won the title in his rookie year with the finals, but again, Kareem was the MVP that season. So, first year or first time going to the playoffs, you're the best player clearly, offensively and defensively, holding your team down on both ends, and you're in the finals. So, off the bat, that's history. But then, in the conference finals, you're facing the defending champions. They won 68 games the previous year, had one of the statistically the most dominant seasons of all time from start to finish, and then they're the best team in the league again. You're facing the MVP, two-time MVP, and on the road, Game 7, and and you're in the finals for the first time, first time ever in the playoffs. That's completely insane. So just the storyline, just his trajectory. I mean, we finally got somebody who has go potential. I'm not saying like Jokic, Giannis, I guess SGA in there. We've seen Curry like top 15, top 10 potential, but it's just something different. Like this guy can be this guy can be Jordan. He can be Kareem. He can be Kobe. It's just better for the league when you have someone like that already doing something that was virtually impossible. But on the other, save the league in a sense to where the OKC won the title for the second straight year. Just what's the aftermath? How do teams try to compete against that? And I just fear for what could have happened to a sport in a league that I love so much. Because the NBA is the teams are such a copycat. It's a copycat league. So teams are just going to try to copy what they're doing. And I forgot where I read this, or I think I saw a video to where somebody confessed that they are literally teaching players how to flop, and they're teaching players how to foul bait and to be able to get into the free throw line as much as possible, which in itself is an art. The greatest scorers of all time all have that in common. They know how to get to the free throw line. Everyone talks about Jordan. Everyone talks about Kobe and Dwayne Wade. Adrian Dantley probably did as good as anyone else. If you actually see how many times I don't know about leading the league in free throws, but look at career free throw attempts, I believe he's in the top 10. So the great scorers know how to do this. But in the manner that they were doing it, I'm gonna be honest with you, I've never been this invested in a single playoff series in a very long time. Since the 2020 finals, for obvious reasons, I'm a Lakers fan, as you can see, the year that Kobe died. So I wanted to see how they will get that all taken care of. But I was A, invested in what Wemby was doing, and two, I was hate watching the OKC Thunder, watching just see them lose. I did it with the Golden State Warriors when they received Kevin Durant. I was literally cheering for LeBron James and the Cavaliers in 2017 and 2018, cheering for the Toronto Raptors in 2019, and then when LeBron took his house to South Beach, was rooting heavily against them all year long. Every single playoff series they had against the I forgot who they played in the first round, the Sixers, Celtics in the second round, Bulls in the third round, and the Dallas Mavericks. I think all of us were hate watching the Miami Heat at that time. Um, to that extent, I think the OKC Thunder was very quickly getting that kind of hate from just not just casual fans, but I think anybody outside of the OKC families and those who actually like watching SGA play. And this was a huge victory. This is a huge view for the NBA that it's fine if they're still not a factor. They're still going to be one of the top teams for the years to come. But them being that successful, potentially being a dynasty, what the aftermath was going to be after that. I think if you remember, like when Michael Jordan said what he said in 1991, that pissed off Isaiah Thomas and really started this whole beef that's been going on for 35 years. It's because he said that the Pistons were bad for the NBA, and I think for what he was trying to say, so they already won 2 titles, and he was already seeing the aftermath of how teams are already copying their style because Michael Jordan is the best player in the league. He's the best player in the world. Won the MVP in 88. He's winning scoring titles 87, 88, 89, 90. He's now reaching his peak. How do you stop him? Well, we do what the Detroit Pistons are doing, and we're going to play extremely physical. Let me hold up. Teams were already physical for decades before. The 60s, the 70s, you saw that style. In the 80s, look at the Boston Celtics. You think of Kurt Rambis clothesline. The Philadelphia 76ers were very physical. The New Jersey Nets, when they had Bo Williams, when they had Daryl Dawkins, were physical. A lot of the teams in the Eastern Conference were physical teams, and they used that style, which allowed them to be so great defensively. But the Detroit Pistons, that was their identity. That's not just, to send a message, if you come to the paint, we'll knock you down. No, this was a huge part of their identity, and in fact, to the point where they were the bad boy Pistons. So in the late 80s and early 90s, the teams that the Bulls were having to play against, those who were actually contenders in the Eastern Conference, copying that style. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks. In the first round series in 1990, Phil Jackson described that series as, I believe, trench warfare. Basically, of like we're in the trenches in a war because it was extremely physical. If you go back and watch that series, the amount of hard fouls, the amount of fights that were going on was insane because in their mind, how do we stop Michael Jordan and the Bulls? You do what the Pistons do. And one highlight that comes to mind is either game 1 or game 2, where Jordan goes to the rim and he's midair, ready to dunk it down. They grab him in midair and throw him down to the ground. And he's just laying there for 4 minutes. He doesn't get thrown out. There's no suspensions. I highly doubt there was a fine. That's just how it was. Fast forward to New York Knicks. How do we stop Michael Jordan? If we're going to get through them and represent your conference, we have to beat this team. We offensively, we can't match him. Patrick Ewing is never going to outscore Michael Jordan in a playoff game, let alone a playoff series. How do we stop them? We do what the Detroit Pistons do: tough defense, and we're super physical. So the effects were already going on. But if they become a dynasty, the first team to ever three-peat, that would have been bad for the league. Because the NBA is in a much better state if you play like the Los Angeles Lakers, if you play like the Celtics, if you play like the Chicago Bulls. The message was right. Maybe the messenger, Jordan, and the impact that he has, you're the leader of that team. Maybe it shouldn't have come from him. But still, he saw the aftermath and what was going to happen. Years later, we appreciate the Pistons, preach how deep they were and how great they were defensively. I think for those who don't live it, really don't hate them as much as the people who were there in the 80s and the 90s and have such a passion for how much they dislike players like Bill Laimbeer and things and Isaiah Thomas. But now a lot of us were living through the OKC Thunder, and they're extremely great, extremely deep. And yes, other players flop. Other players foul bait. They're not the first ones. SGA is certainly not the first scorer to do this. But it is their identity. Whether they like it or not, people are associating the OKC Thunder now to flopping, foul baiting, and crying to the refs. That is their identity. And if you can't beat them, join them, especially now in today's league. So how many players, in order just to get free points, extra points, are copy their style? And if they would have won again, they go to the finals or being the New York Knicks, whether they're healthy or not. Just something that was a good matchup for the Knicks. Then that could have happened. So I'm glad. I was so happy. I was so excited that Wemby was able to get that done. He played a great game, so did the rest of his teammates. So that was great. Also, like, I wasn't surprised to see the Thunder play that way. How in addition, how a lot of the players, especially Chet, did not show up in that situation. Because I think if you're resorting to flopping, for me at least, it's a weak move. You have a weak mentality if either I can't score one-on-one, I can't get what I want offensively, so I'm gonna resort to kind of these theatrics, try to trick the refs and then go into the free throw line. For me, that's a weak move. For me, that's not pride as a basketball player to play that way. So, areas of the game. Game 7, biggest game of your life. Well, at least biggest game of the season, because game 7, the finals, just obviously the odds are bigger there. But Chet going 1 for 2, not attempting a shot for the entire second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, weak-minded. What about SGA throughout the entire series? Where if I wouldn't pull up the numbers, what do you shoot? Not 39%. I'm not going to try to not downplay. I'm not going to try to exaggerate too much. I believe he shot like 41 or 42% for the series, if I'm not mistaken, compared to what, 55% for the regular season. So regular season, 31.1 points per game on 55% shooting, shot 38% from the three. And then this series, 25.9 points on 40.9% shooting. There you go. Shot 20% from the three. Huge drop. So things are going your way. You're having some bad scoring games. You scored over 20 points for 2 or 3 straight seasons, and then in this playoff series alone, you score under 20 twice against a team that's much more physical, much better defender, not gonna let you get to your spots. I mean, that's weak, man. That's weak. I think that just reflects on the identity of this team, man. And I don't know, a team like that just can't they can't be a potential dynasty. They can't dominate the league like that. So, yeah, I'm just I think a W all around for the NBA for them to kinda get them out, and people are saying, like, soul searching, maybe they can make changes. This is who they are. They're gonna be like this until however long their championship window is. So, just expect them to continue playing like this, and we're gonna continue hating on them. And whenever the run's over, we'll see how many more titles they win. We'll see what they do. But man, that was such an exciting game. So that means for the finals, we have the 1999 rematch of the Knicks in the San Antonio Spurs rematch again, like I said, from 27 years ago, which was the first finals. Actually, that 99 series was actually the first series that I remember like watching on TV. I was born in '93. I was a huge Michael Jordan fan. If you follow my channel, you know how much I talk about him. So I had to have watch him play. I had to have because every time I played basketball, I thought I was Jordan the Bulls. Um, appreciate you catching the live. I appreciate it. So I had to know who Jordan was for me to have his jersey as a little kid, try to be like Mike every time we play, but I just don't remember watching the games. And unfortunately, the first time I remember watching games, like my memory goes back and I know what happened was the 1999 playoffs. So I thought that's pretty cool, pretty ironic that we're seeing this again 27 years later. Um, but as far as who I believe is going to win the series, I think it's going to be the Spurs. I think the Spurs got them. Historically speaking, when a team goes this long without playing, everyone always talks about like the 2001 Lakers. I forgot there was. I mean, the Knicks in Game One of the conference finals against the Cavaliers. How bad they played for the first three quarters uh, until they finally something finally clicked in the fourth quarter. They were to come back. So that's not going to happen to the Spurs. I think Game One, especially as the finals, is a lot more pressure. Um, I think they're down 2-0, and it's just simply trying to steal a game on the road. So, and how great OKC was offensively, and they shut them down for a lot of the games throughout the series. They can do the same thing to the New York Knicks. Um, so, just I think the Spurs could probably get this done in 6 games, but 6 or 7 games. But that's just my pick. In fact, let me see if I could put this in the see if I can create a poll and we can see who believes will win this series. I'm kind of interested in seeing what you guys think. Maybe y'all could let me know in the chat um, who you think is going to win the series. Yeah, so the New York Knicks. I was talking to a family member, just a casual fan, and she was asking me like, who was the team that cost the most? Is what she said, the most valuable team in the league, and she thought it would have been the Lakers for obvious reasons. I'm like, no, it's the New York Knicks. I told him like, what's crazy about that is they haven't won a championship since 1973, and they were just blown away. Like, how can that be the most valuable team in the league when you haven't won in over 5 decades? Or 50 whatever it is, 53 years. And what's crazy when I was looking back at it, like how many shots they had of potentially winning the title, even going to the finals. I mean, they had some pretty close calls if we look back at it. I just released a video about Will Chamberlain's era of the Los Angeles Lakers and kind of going through the 1969 through the 1973 seasons, which was his era of the Lakers. And in 1969, the Knicks weren't the top seed. That was the Washington, not the Washington, the Baltimore Bullets were the top seed because they got West unsettled. But in the finals, they're playing against the Boston Celtics, and they got home court advantage. And there's 2 games that was decided by 1 point. And I think an additional game that was decided by 3 points. Now that's 2 possessions at that time because there's no 3-point line. So they got upset because the Celtics won this just magical run, where I think 2 or no 3 of their 4 playoff series was on the road, and they're just and they find a way to gut it out against each series. But if they play the Lakers in '69, I mean, do they go back to back, '69 and '70? I Their regular season matchups that year, kind of interesting seeing that because if you look at Willis Reed's numbers in '69 and '70, they're incredibly similar from his MVP year. And when he won in 1970, and I believe he finished second in MVP voting in '69. So he was reaching his peak. He was certainly in the prime of his career, and historically speaking, he played very well against Will Chamberlain, especially past his rookie year, 68, 69, 70, and onwards before the injuries. So against the Lakers that season, no, no, look at that. So when Willis Reed was on the court, they played each other 6 times and went 1-5. No, it doesn't seem like they were ready that year. Although that season, the New York Knicks won 54 games, so they're starting to hit their stride. There's the potential was there, but yeah, I can see why they lost to the Boston Celtics first final, and if they found a way to reach the finals, I think the Lakers got them. But in 1970, of course, they won the titles. You guys all know. 71, they lost in 7 to the Baltimore Bullets again. Wes Unseld and Earl Monroe. 72 was the Lakers' year. 73, of course, they won the title. They won the title again. And then after that, Willis Reed is essentially gone. Walt Frazier eventually gets traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and now it's time to start rebuilding the roster again. And although they still have Earl Monroe, they brought in Bob McAdoo, they brought in Spencer Haywood. That didn't work. Now we get into the 80s. And the 84 postseason, if you guys remember, that was a year where Bernard King went crazy in the postseason. First round, they against the Detroit Pistons, he averaged over 40 points per game, 40 or 42 points per game on 61% shooting for those 5 games. Now this was prior to the Bad Boys era, so they weren't great defensively. This is more of a West Coast offense with Kelly Tripucka, John Long, Vinnie Johnson. There weren't many great one-on-one defenders at that time before they started, rebuild the roster. So you beat the Pistons in 5 and take the Boston Celtics to 7 games, where the can't win a game at Madison Square Garden. And I don't think the Pistons win a game at Madison Square Garden either. It's just how tough it was to win there at that time. And I was thinking, like, could have the Knicks somehow, some way upset the Boston Celtics in '84? I thought, well, maybe could they have stole the game at home at the Boston Garden, and play the Milwaukee Bucks in the conference finals, and then reach the finals and play the Lakers. I was kinda looking at the box scores, and, there was no way. Every single game at on the road, the Knicks lost by 12 or 13 points at least. Blowouts every single game when they were on the road. So it was basically they overachieved. This series was never supposed to go that. Celtics won 62 games, right? So I mean, they were the best team in the league. So it would kind of show that they still had some maturity to do, some improvements to do for that team. But so 84, not really. After that, we get Michael Jordan era. 89, they're a 50-win team. They faced the Bulls in the semifinals. First time they faced Jordan, the Bulls, in the playoffs. And then after that, and then the Bulls upset them. They beat them in 6 games. 1990, they lose to the Pistons. 91, you lose to the Bulls. 92, you lost to the Bulls. 93, you lost to the Bulls. 94, you go to 7 games against the Houston Rockets. And if you look at the numbers of that series, because it was Hakeem Olajuwon against Patrick Ewing. That's the more matchup. Hakeem Olajuwon completely annihilated Patrick Ewing in that he shot, I believe it was 36% for the series. Now Patrick was great defensively. I believe he holds the record top 3 as far as most blocks. It's even a not a playoff round, I believe for a final series. So he was great so at least he made it up on the defensive end. However, on offense, Patrick Ewing, I'm pulling up the numbers right now. 36.3%. There you go. 36.3%. Now he averaged 4.3 blocks. So he knew he had to make an impact some way. And averaged 18.9 points per game for the series. So essentially, if he's just a little better, if he can pull out maybe just one game where he not necessarily takes over offensively, but he just has a subpar game, 25, 28 points on whatever, 46% shooting, you get a much needed victory, and they could have won the championship if he's just adequate offensively. But Hakeem just he did this to David Robinson how many times? But at least he was respectable in that 95 series. He was completely outplayed, but he didn't choke. He didn't choke like this. And so 94 was obviously their best opportunity, their best chance of winning the championship. And then after that, 95 you lose to the Indiana Pacers in 7 games. That's the missed layup from Patrick Ewing. 96 you lose to the Bulls, so there's no chance there. 97 Miami Heat. That's a Tim Hardaway game for game 7. And then 98, goodness gracious, I think that was also the Miami. No, I can't. Goodness gracious, why can't I remember what happened in 98? Yep, that was okay. So 90 they lost to the Pacers, and then 99 was the finals appearance. So, and then since then, it's just been and it's been hell for them for over 2 decades. And so man, that's just especially when you look at their history, um, just as a fan, just so happy to see them back in the finals again. Um, Also, like when you look at the because we mentioned man, so many players. We mentioned Will Reed, obviously, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe. That's not to mention Dave DeBusschere, um, Bernard King, Patrick Ewing, of course, and then all the role players that played during that time. Since then, Carmelo Anthony's only player honestly worth mentioning. At this point, Jalen Brunson and where he ranks, like, among Knicks fans, because historically speaking, I have Walt Frazier, Willie Reed, and not Carmelo, and Patrick Ewing in my top 50. Carmelo is somewhere in the top 65. Jalen Brunson, for what I'm hearing, many fans are saying that if he wins the title, he is the best Knick ever, best Knick of all time. Which I know a lot of it is recency bias and just a city that's starved to see their best team in a championship. It is a basketball city, so you bring a title back to New York and what that means, I completely understand that. But as far as, like, historically speaking, where he's gonna rank if he brings a title to New York, man, like, when it comes to someone like Walt Frazier and Willis Reed, they did play in a stacked team. And that is what the New York Knicks had to their advantage in the 70s. Depth, great play, great ball movement. You had the defense of Walt Frazier and Willis Reed, great bench. So you had the depth more than anything than just one individual. Although Willis Reed did win MVP in 1970, that was more of a team. That was a team award. He wasn't better than Kareem even though it was his rookie year. Kareem was still better individually, had better numbers. Jerry West, in my opinion, was snubbed winning the MVP that season, who posted the best numbers that year out of anybody. No question about it. Bernard King, injuries took injuries completely ruined his prime and what could have been. And then Patrick Ewing, God bless his soul, he just wasn't good enough to lead your team to a championship. We all saw that. But in the last 3 seasons, what we have seen from Jalen Brunson is a top five, fifth in MVP voting in 2024, averaging 28.7 points per game. Following season, you're averaging 26 points. That's 2025. And you lead your team. Was it the conference finals? Yep. Lead your team to the conference finals and you lose in 6 games. And now you're in the finals. And if you look at the roster, especially in the regular season, Karl Anthony Towns, your second best player. He's averaging just at 20 points per game on 50% shooting, 11.9 rebounds, 3 assists. So unequivocally, Jalen Brunson is your best player. The only player in the playoffs that's averaging over 20 points per game. Now, their depth is amazing. But no, if he wins a title on this one, how clutch he is, and just his overall playmaking, what he's doing on the scoring end, and if you beat Wemby in the finals in the San Antonio Spurs, man, I think the trajectory that he's going to be on, as far as just individually, I'm just saying that but at first I was kind of scoffing at the idea, like, nah, there's no way. Like, you don't disrespect the greats of the past. Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe. We know how great of an individual scorer he was. Melo, Bernard King. I mean, we talked about 42 points per game on 61% shooting. But, like, individually, I think there could be a case for Jalen Brunson, if he gets this done, to be that guy that they're saying. And the thing about New York Knicks fans, Michael Jordan did. They know their stuff. They know their history. They respect to the past. So if they're saying this, I think it means something. They definitely follow that guy and their team much more than I do, as much as I love the history of the Knicks. So that's on, man. That's on the table for Jalen Brunson. Something that nobody was envisioning envisioning whenever this happened. Um, Now the San Antonio Spurs, about a month ago, I believe it was a month ago, um, did a video on the George Gervin era of the San Antonio Spurs. Um, Basically, since they were in the NBA at the 76/77 season onto the 84/85 season. So looking at the opportunities because they completely dominated the 2000s, and we all know about that history. But I think what happened prior to the 21st century or prior to 1999, because they did win the championship there. There was some, believe it or not, some missed opportunities that if you were a San Antonio fan, I was like, man, we missed on a potential either a finals appearance or even winning a championship. The first one is 1979. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals. At that time, they were playing East, and they were playing the Washington Bullets. They had a 3-1 series lead against Elvin Hayes, Wes Unseld, Bob Dandridge, Phil Chenier. And in the finals, that means they're playing against Seattle Supersonics. And in the regular season, I believe they won their matchup. I think 3-2. And all you had to do was win one game. You're in game 7. The Washington Bullets win game 5 at home. They steal a game in game 6 in San Antonio. And then game 7, George Gervin goes for, I think, 42 points on like 53% shooting. And they're in control, and they somehow lose the lead in the final moments in the fourth quarter. Bob Dandridge makes one of the ultra rare, one of the few game winners of all time in a game 7. They lose that game. But if they find a way to hold on, maybe get an extra stop, get an extra basket, there in the end. If in the finals against the Seattle Supersonics, I'm very curious. Do they win the championship? And how we look historically at that team, how we look at George Gervin, who, when we talk about the greatest shooting guards of all time, never get mentioned. In fact, a lot of times you bring up Reggie Miller first before you actually bring up the Iceman. And basically it's because of his, well, when I say playoff failures, I'm not saying he wasn't a good playoff performer, because he was. Showed up plenty of times in big games. We just talked about what he did in game 7. So the San Antonio Spurs go into the finals in 79. I believe they beat the Seattle Supersonics. They weren't I don't think they were gonna have home court advantage, because the Sonics won over 50 games. I know the Spurs, I believe, did as well. And they were in the finals the previous year. And as on top of that, either top 3 or top 4 defensive team in the league. So they would have made things tough on them, but the Bulls were just, if not better, defensively than the San Antonio Spurs. So my gut says they win, just because of how deep they were. James Silas, Larry Keenan, Bill Pauls, like, I just think their depth overwhelms them, and it goes to 6 or 7 games, and the Spurs win. That's just my gut feeling. I think George gets celebrated much more if they find a way to pull that off. And for those who haven't watched his highlight, I hate saying highlight reels. If you watch the games that are available to watch from the Spurs during that time, George Gervin has one of the deepest bags, not just of his time, of ever. Individually, scoring wise, the number of ways you can score is, I'm not going to say Jordan level or Kobe level, but just a tier below. That's how great he was on the basket. And I think that would have highlighted his greatness much more so than just being a footnote of the golden era of basketball. So that's a missed opportunity. 1980, just an off year for them. They got rid of Doug Moe after that because he's completely underachieved. Terrible defensive team. 81 was supposed to be kind of a rebuild, not necessarily a rebuild, but kind of we're moving things around. Get rid of Larry Keenan, and we're going to focus on defense. So you bring in George Johnson, and then you bring in goodness, what's his name? He played for the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan in '86. He was the center. Dave Corzine. Dave Corzine. So now they're focused on defense, and they're much better defensively. But they're still a piece away because James Silas is now, because of the injuries, not the same player anymore. And then all of a sudden, Magic gets hurt. The Lakers are having internal problems in their locker room. The disease is more of, as Pelly said. Playoffs start, and they lose in the first round against the Houston Rockets, who won 40 games. Knicks Suns were the top team in the West. They won 55, 57 games, led by Dennis Johnson. You got Walter Davis. They lose in the semifinals in 7 games against the Kansas City Kings, who also won 40 games. Losing records 40 and 42, the Kansas City Kings. Houston Rockets losing records 40 and 42. Don't mean to ignore the chat. Thank you guys for tuning in. Yep, Laker fans over here. Yep, we're repping. As far as the refs, refs are always going to be inconsistent. Honestly, it's I understand that. Like, I always hate watching the OKC Thunder, my guy, and so I know I could be a little bit biased as far as whenever a call is made in favor of OKC Thunder, it's just like blown out of proportion because they're flopping again, they're flailing again. Like, see, this what always happens, and then when it happens to Spurs, there's just like crickets, no reaction whatsoever as far as like what is happening with as far as the discrepancy in free throws, and many times the Spurs were winning the free throw battles. So, man, I get your frustration. I get the frustration from OKC fans because there is not hypocrisy. Maybe there is a double standard, but when that's the reputation you have, and you're perfecting the art of flopping. Yeah, I guess I definitely understand your frustration. And in the finals, maybe it'll be a little bit more not monitored better, but called better because it's at the OKC Thunder, and although Jalen Brunson does flop, no one really cares, which is unfair. But yeah, no, I definitely understand that. Back to the 81 Spurs though. So in the semifinals, now they're playing the Houston Rockets, and it's all about stopping Moses Malone. To contain him, you win the series. It's as simple as that. Just use your depth, use your offensive greatness, because even though they were missing a piece or two, they're still a top 3 or top 5 offensive team in the league. So, game 5 at home, you lose. That down 3-2. And now it's okay. The Cinderella story is real. The Houston Rockets weren't a great team in the regular season, but they picked it up in the playoffs. So they had some key pieces, and we'll get to that in just a moment. You're still on the road in Game 6, and then in Game 7, you stop Moses Malone. He shot like 38% in that game. But then Calvin Murphy happens, Game 5 and Game 7. And he's scoring over 40 points, making ridiculous shots. And he's an undersized shooting guard. I don't think he's the point guard, or he's playing both roles, whatever the case may be. And then, unfortunately, George Gervin, for all the times he did show up, didn't show up that game. And he was contained in that second half. And man, if they find a way to win that game, they beat the Kansas City Kings because they're a much better matchup. Although they got George Johnson, and he was a leading shot blocker, whether it's that season or the seasons prior, you're still not going to contain Moses Malone. The block too big, too strong, too skilled. And to take Zion, stop it, stop it. He's not stopping Moses. But better matchup for the Kansas City Kings because their front line was you don't have anyone like Moses. And if you're just going to try to outscore us, that's what we do. We're going to beat them. So I think you get past somehow the Houston Rockets. You were favored. You're the better team. You beat the Kansas City Kings, and in the finals, you play the Boston Celtics. At least you reached it because no way being the Boston Celtics. Historically speaking, I did a video. Larry Bird versus every top 75 player. I was shocked on two players. His matchup against George Gervin, I think he went like 3 and 13. No, went 13 against Bird. He only won 3 times out of their 16 or 17 matchup. He completely destroyed that matchup. Like Bird was not a good matchup for the Spurs. Too much size, too much depth. The Celtics were too tough, and just no one. You're not going to give any resistance, and you're not going to do anything to stop Larry Bird, Tiny Archibald, obviously Parrish, Mikal coming off the bench, Cedric Maxwell, one of the most efficient scoring forwards of all time. Not time scores, but when he got the ball, he normally scoring and a very high efficient rate. They're not winning that series, but at least to the finals. And we're not going to hold that over George's head, where it's like you never reached the finals, although you were such a great scorer. So he missed out on. I think no one ever brings up the 81 Spurs in that 81 postseason, but that would have been such a missed opportunity. That is a good question. Wemby or Duncan in '99, and then I'll get to the Bill Russell. That's a fair comment. As far as what's more impressive, beating the Shaq, not the Shaq. Okay, Shaq and Kobe Lakers, but Kobe, that was his first year in the starting lineup. Beating Shaq in '99 or beating SGA this year, it's got to be the OKC Thunder because the Lakers didn't learn when yet. Shaq is still Shaq and the most dominant big man of that year, but he finished in the All NBA second team that year. Mourning finished above him in the MVP race, and he was All NBA first team, and I believe he won the Defensive Player of the Year that year. So league voters decided that he was the best center, even though he wasn't, just because of just the turmoil that was happening in the Lakers. Them you trade Eddie Jones for Glenn Rice. Kurt Rambis is, according to Jeff Pearlman in his book, babying Kobe and taking his side. You don't know what to do with the offense, so that had more to do with the struggles than actually Shaq. And I don't think what Tim Duncan did that series completely annihilated them. One of his best playoff series of all time. If we pull up the numbers, I think he averaged close to, it wasn't third. Duncan hardly averages for a playoff series, but it was pretty close. It was maybe 29 or 28, very high efficiency. And then the rebounds and the block numbers, of course, are there. Yeah. 29 points on 51% shooting, 10.8 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 2 blocks per game, and 1 steals per game. And he outplayed Shaq because Shaq averaged 23.8 points on 49% shooting. So he outplayed the Diesel. However, I think this was not the first time because he was a rookie in '98. But facing the Twin Towers for a full 7-game series, I think without the triangle offense, man, there's just they didn't know how to counteract that. Just no offensive structure, and Kobe wasn't Kobe yet. So the fact that they swept them shows that there's still a lot of problems in the Lakers that they had to fix. They weren't an established team. But this OKC Thunder, You won 68 games the previous year. Now you win 64. SGA is a two-time MVP. Um, and this is his first playoff run. Duncan, this was his second because they went to the playoffs the previous year and they lost to the Utah Jazz, I believe, in 7 games. So if he wins the title, just the fact that you beat them and then you win the finals in your first playoff run, I think I would give the nod to Wemby. And also, Duncan didn't have a performance like Wemby did in game 1. That 40-point, double overtime, like thriller, making those clutch shots. Great at game 3 and game 4. I see at 37 and 36 points. Those were great numbers. But what we did in game 1, that was something else. I would give just the slightest of edges to Wemby, just on the level of impressiveness. If what was better, I think that's going to be a little bit tougher. But the fact that Duncan had David Robinson, because if you look at the defensive numbers, Robinson had a lot to do with that. Although he wasn't the same player offensively, defensively he was just as impactful as he was prior to his injury in '97. So you have to give Duncan wasn't alone defensively on the bench. He had arguably, if not the most impactful defensive player guarding the paint, while Wemby is by himself guarding the paint. So I think that itself is more impressive. The '98 Lakers, they won over 60 games, and they were extremely deep. 4 All-Stars, no, absolutely, but they lost Nick Van Exel. Nick Van Exel's on the '99 team. So you replace him with, is Derek Fisher or is it Derek Harper that's the starting point guard? You bring in Derek Harper for veteran leadership, but he's not, at that point of his career, not bringing that much value off. Because the Lakers, their biggest strength in '98 was offense. They were one of the top scoring teams, if not the most top scoring team in the league. They were scoring one like nothing. This was a '98 when teams weren't even scoring that many points. So you lose Nick Van Exel, and then you get rid of Eddie Jones, great two-way player. And although I love Glenn Rice, I mean, I remember voting for Glenn Rice for the All-Star game when I'm 6, 7 years old. So I just loved him as a Hornet, loved him in the Lakers. But in '99, according to the reports, he came in out of shape, wasn't ready to go, and he wasn't the only one. 60% of the players in that '99 season were expecting that season to get canceled, and nobody was ready to go. And now everyone's playing 50 games in 90 days, and then you're with the Hornets. Now you have to go to another team. You're already not in shape. There is no offensive structure. There is no offensive identity. What's Glenn Rice going to do? And he just wasn't. He wasn't himself. He had a few games where he was great. Like I remember this game against the New York Knicks where that was classic Glenn Rice. But overall, with the Lakers, he was not. Yeah, look at that. So for the season, he 17.5 points per game on 43%. That's not Glenn Rice. That's not him. Like he was way more efficient in the previous year with the Hornets. So it's kind of like what do we do with Glenn Rice? And a lot of times he would disappear just because they didn't know what to do. So Lakers were still a great team. You're right. Lakers were still a great team. I'm not trying to say they weren't. I'm not trying to say that wasn't a potential championship contending team. I'm just saying I don't think they were at that year they were ready yet. Maturity-wise, and then Kobe just needed to grow a little bit more to be that consistent scoring option, especially when you're playing such a dominant defensive team like the Spurs. As far as the Bill Russell videos, man, I would love to do more Russell videos. When I talk about the '60s, honestly, I feel like that's like the cutoff because I feel like people watch for my history videos. The '70s, I'll get some as far as like the amount of exposure views, '80s, of course, the '90s, yeah. I mean, it's Jordan, and a lot of people my age like watching it. When it comes to the '60s and the ball, Celtics, and Bill Russell, sometimes I have to make sure it's the right subject. It's um, just the right video to be able to make sure I'm not. I don't want to say it's never a waste of time to make video, but I don't want to spend much energy to be able to make a video that hardly gets maybe 1,000 views. Because no, I do want to make more Bill Russell videos, potentially a video about Sam Jones, um, as far as like his impact on the '65 season, which was their best season for the Celtics. I would love that. I would love to do that. So that potential, yes, I think that's something that's going to happen. Sooner rather than later. Um, after the '81, so going back to the San Antonio Spurs, as far as it wasn't a lot of chances after that. '82, you lost to the Lakers and swept the conference finals. '83, not George Gervin, you get Artis Gilmore, you lose in 6 games. You know, you just lost that was your window. Kareem outplayed Artis. Magic was amazing. Storm Nixon was amazing, and that's it. After that, once Gervin's gone, you get Alvin Robertson, right? That era kind of starts. Um, you're getting some pieces, but they still weren't the fringe playoff team. If I'm not mistaken. And then once David Robinson comes in 1990, again Harry Cummings, I believe Mo Cheeks was there. So you get some veterans. You get some. No, Mo Cheeks Philadelphia. Excuse me. I don't know why I said Mo Cheeks. Um, or maybe he was. I'm sorry. I have to fact check myself. But you get some veterans players, and they win, I think, 55 games. And as far as the David Robinson era, other than '95, because '91 you lose, no, '90 you lose to the Blazers in 7. '91, there was a whole bunch of first round exits that David Robinson experienced during that time, because was starting to get the reputation of not being a great playoff performer prior to Duncan being there. Because '94 for sure, he was battling Hakeem Olajuwon for the MVP. They lost in the first round to the Utah Jazz. '93, you lose in the semifinals against the Phoenix Suns because Charles Barkley made that game winner in Game 6. And then '92, I believe, goes to the Warriors first round. Chris Mullin and Tim Hardaway, they just completely overwhelmed me offensively. No, that was '91. So '92, you didn't make the playoffs because you got injured. Yeah, that's right. Because you were injured. Yeah. So just not enough pieces the Spurs had to give them that second scoring option. Sean Elliott came a little bit later. Avery Johnson, a great floor general, but nothing, you know, not going to provide a lot of scoring. And then bring in Dennis Rodman, and he's great pointing out paint, but still nobody to help for scoring. I think for David Robinson, who was someone made a good comment on insane peak video for his '94 season. Someone made a great observation. Um, I remember his name, the channel name. He didn't have that one go-to move in the post. It was good enough. Sometimes you can use his strength and athleticism and get points in the post, but he didn't have that one move. It's like he does this, and he's scoring every time. He did not have that. He can score in the mid range. He had score from 18 to 22 feet. But when you play a team like the Utah Jazz, or you play a team where you play against Hakeem Olajuwon, and sometimes it's just like, we need to score, do your thing, save us. He couldn't come through. And when I was watching like every game against the Utah Jazz in that '94 season, that '94 series, he couldn't do nothing. Nothing against Karl Malone, and nothing against man. I can't forget the center that played. I can't remember who was their center during that time, but that was the one thing he was missing in his game. Great regular season player, but in the playoffs, more times than not, that's what held him back. And if you look at each playoff series and each playoff run, his efficiency went down from the regular season, and usually scoring went down. And sometimes it just comes down to that, man. Unfortunately, dude, I guess would have faced the Bulls in the finals in '98. My guy, that would have been, forget the records, the rates in '98 with the Jazz. That would have doubled. That would have doubled that. The records that they broke. As far as everyone tuning in and stop it. That would have been um. Come on, that would have been incredible. Kobe, Shaq, Jordan, Pippen. That would have been amazing. Um, Better Knicks team is unquestionably. Well, no, I'm gonna take that back. I will say '94, just because Patrick Ewing was. He finished in top 5 in MVP in '93. I think again in '94. So this was not peak Patrick Ewing, but still top 3 big man in the league behind obviously Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson. And then the pieces around him were in the coaching of Riley. And as far as like defensive impact, although '99 Knicks were great defensively, I think just because of the era and how it was played, had a lot of long, lengthy, versatile defenders. I think don't get nothing away from players like Latrell Sprewell, Marcus Camby. Charlie Ward was also a tough defender, but Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, you have John Starks, who's an All NBA defender. Um, I'll give the edge to the '94 Knicks. Better success because they won 60 games and excuse me, they won 60 games in '93. They didn't win that much in '94. Um, but still the success. '92, you take the Bulls to 7 games with that same core, and then you go win 60 in '93. '94, you're 1 game away from winning the finals. And then '99, it was kind of what's that window? You're the 8 seed, you make that run, you beat the Miami Heat. That's impressive. What I will say is, not just that the Knicks had the Miami Heat's number, dude, every time Tim Hardaway and Jamal Mashburn played against the Knicks, just a dud. Did nothing. I'm talking like 20, 30% for the series. And so Alonzo Mourning will get you 20 and 10, but he's not doing more than that. He's not gonna like look at his playoff logs. How many times he gave you 30 and 15? You might find 1 or 2 for his entire career. He's gonna give you 20 and 10 every game, and block 3 to 5 shots, and that's it. You need someone else to take care of the scoring. That's how important Tim Hardaway was. No, Hardaway for sure. My next video is gonna be the '97 MVP race, and yeah, Hardaway's was top. He was fourth in MVP. He was fourth in MVP voting. How important he was to the Miami Heat for sure. Game 7 against the Knicks in '98, absolutely, absolutely. He had those moments, but against the Knicks in '99, he's older. He already had a lot of injuries, and how physical and tough they were defensively. Sometimes he just couldn't. He couldn't get going for some of that series, especially Game 5. I think they both. The '99 series against the New York Knicks. Yeah. Tim in game 2, Tim Hardaway, 7 points on 1 of 5. See, something's wrong with him. Game 3, 5 points on 1 of 8 shooting. And then game 5, which is, the famous Allen Houston shot, 9 points on 4 of 10 shooting, man. It's just like, now at that point of his career, he's 32, 33 years old. So, I mean, now during this time, these are dog years. So like how tough, especially major injuries, playing almost every game. How intense. I understand why. Even though he's a young player, factoring all that in, I can see why he's not giving the same impact that he was in previous years. And then Jamal Mashburn, bro, game 5 actually he wasn't too bad. He scored 16 points on 5 of 9 shooting. But then if you look at the series for that first round, so he did show up there, 10 points per game on 38% shooting. I mean, goodness gracious. If just one of those two, if Tim or Jamal just do their normal production, just average regular season games, the Knicks, they beat the Knicks, and that means you got the Hawks in the semifinals, Indiana Pacers. That's always a toss up when you play a team like that. But I don't know. I feel like the '99 Knicks. I don't think either they're better than the '94 team. I just think that team's deeper, tougher defensively. Patrick Ewing's always going to be a big factor because he is still a top 7 player in the league. So yeah, that's just. I think historically speaking, you have to go with them. Yeah, man. Hakeem Olajuwon over Tim Duncan. That's a I don't think as hard to take as people think. I think that is interchangeable. Success wise, if you look if your criteria is wins and career numbers, um, not even individual accolades, you have to give that to Hakeem. Even though he won 2 MVPs. But if you like, when I say individual accolades, like look at records. Who's the number of players who have averaged this stat line for a season and has nothing, no records whatsoever. Whereas, Duncan was the first and only player to do this, this, and this. There's not one you could think of for Tim Duncan, other than advanced metrics like his win shares for the 2003 playoffs. That's like I think number 1 or 3, if you even care about that. Well, when it comes to like Hakeem averaging 4.5 blocks per game, also by the way, 23 points per game and 14 rebounds per game, 2 steals per game. Like, come on, like Hakeem is. I'll tell you one thing: if you were doing not like a fantasy draft, you're building your team around a player. You want Duncan or Hakeem. I think many people will be surprised of how many are picking Hakeem over Tim Duncan, man. No, yeah. I know I would be. I might rank higher greatest players just because of the 5 titles and, being the culture, the foundation of a team that was a mini dynasty, all that you have to say that. But the Houston Rockets, after you lost Ralph Sampson, and then you have other players who were getting traded away because of your drug problems. And then now you have no roster. And then you have to build that up. He's at the tail end of his prime. And by the time you finally figure that out in 1993, he's already like 30 years old. So you completely missed his entire athletic prime when he went to the finals in 86. And then in 87, he averaged like in that series against the Seattle Supersonics, like 35 points per game and 20 rebounds and blocks per game. Like, bro, like, come on. You give that guy the structure of an organization like the San Antonio Spurs with Greg Popovich and what they did with drafting great players and allowing them to go. Come on, man, Hakeem. Stop it. I mean, he's potentially top 5 player ever. If he had that, for his career. And I know in the past I was a little bit tough on like getting bounced from the first round so many times during his prime, and then he missed the playoffs in '92. But I can't blame that. I can't blame that on Hakeem. I can't. I can't blame that on Hakeem Olajuwon. He did need to grow up a little bit. He did need to learn how to kind of trust his teammates and share the ball instead of try to do everything on his own. That was his biggest criticism. You get double or triple team, and he would just try to force his way into one of his moves instead of trusting his team. So every player has a weakness, but I think he would have grown a lot faster if he saw actual structure within the organization and making good decisions when it comes to roster movement and draft picks and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I was maybe too hard on Hakeem Olajuwon. Bro, I can't believe I ranked Kevin Durant over. I can't. I want to delete that my top 100 video list. I want to delete it forever because I can't believe I ranked Kevin Durant over Hakeem Olajuwon. Bro, that's that was an L take by me for sure. But I listened to the comments. I reassessed, you know, reassessed the way I viewed the game and the player. And one of these days I will redo my top 100 list. I might even do it. I was kind of thinking about doing a top 300 list, to be honest, one of these days, and just go crazy with it. I promise you, Kevin Durant's not going to be close to Hakeem Olajuwon. I promise you that. Yeah, that's come on. I don't know what I was thinking there. But yeah, man. The history of the blasphemy is incredibly blasphemous, man. 100%. And yeah, well, I'll tell you what. At least Kevin Durant, as far as the competitiveness, I appreciate he's weak on the fact that he can't lead a team. But at least when I watch him play, I don't see the flopping and the as much crying to the refs as I saw with SGA. So I can appreciate that, and he doesn't do what James Harden does. But yeah, just like as far as intangibles and his lack of interest for being a leader, and kind of speaking of that, I was reading an article from the back in the day when it was the Grantland. That was the Ringer. Bill Simmons wrote this article about that Bill Russell told him that this player was like calling him every day, like, "Hey, I read your book about being a good leader, and I want to pick your brain about like how I can lead a team." And then Bill Simmons is like, "Was it LeBron James?" And he's like, "No, it wasn't LeBron." He's like, "It had to be Kevin Durant. It was Durant." And Bill's like, "No, it was Kobe Bryant." He's like, "What? Kobe? He doesn't care about being a leader." It's like that take has aged incredibly bad because if Kevin Durant read that book and picked books about being a leader, who knows, right? Like the talent that he had could have absolutely done something at least a little bit with that information that Bill Russell shared with his books. But how much he looks up to Kobe Bryant and what he did to incorporate Bill Russell's leadership into his own style, because he wasn't a leader like Bill Russell was. Although Bill Russell was a very tough dude and old school, obviously this was the 60s, but he was a little bit more kind of arm around your neck, as far as like patting you back. Kobe's much more cutthroat, much more Jordan like, but that's his personality. That was his style. So he just wanted to incorporate some of the things that Bill did to kind of help his teammates. If Durant had any interest in that, there's your resources. At least ask Kobe, "Hey, how do I be a better leader?" He just didn't care. Let's just play ball and let's see what happens. Man, that's just as far as Bill Simmons. I hope he appreciated Kobe a lot more after a person that he looks up to so much as Bill Russell's like, "Yeah, Kobe's my guy, and we talk all the time." hmm Yeah, I, I bet he maybe respected him just a little bit more, during that time. But yeah, no, this is going to be incredibly entertaining final series. I'm gonna enjoy it, and I'm not going to be upset, as much as I was during this series with the OKC Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs. And either team that wins, man, is going to be great for the NBA. New York City is going to go incredibly crazy if they find a way to pull this out. And then Wemby, man, it's just a matter of time until he passes all these legends and just becomes, you know, there with the players in the Mount Rushmores. So yeah, that's gonna be either way. It's gonna be a win. If it's competitive or it goes 5 or 7 games, I think it's gonna be great. Yeah, Max Calvin's an idiot. Okay, all right, man. So I appreciate you guys being live with me. My first one. Um, this is basically gonna let you know. So for the terrible aesthetics of what's behind me, no vibe. I couldn't. There's no vibe here. Just you and me talking my home office, but we'll try to do some more of these. Hopefully once a week is what I'm thinking. Maybe on a Monday or Tuesday, wherever the case may be. I appreciate the chat. I know it wasn't many of us, but this was still pretty cool to go back and forth. And this video will be in the channel in the live section if you ever want to see it. And then the Will Chamberlain video, Lakers era, is out right now. So I love you guys. Appreciate you. Till next time.